And
I think that would be a very nasty situation that could arise as far as resolving things.
Absolutely. And again, to the extent that you have talked with your medical team ahead of time, that you've done the documentation and the paperwork ahead of time, and that the treatment team is aware of this, and your healthcare power of attorney is confident in the documentation they have and the rights that they have to make these decisions for you, that can really streamline the process. But this leads in, I think, beautifully to the third cornerstone of successful aging, or if you're comfortable heading there, which is your health and well-being as you age. And one of the specific issues for the aging LGBTQ community is lack of competent, inclusive health care. There are a whole host of issues that are really specific to the aging LGBTQ community, ranging in things from a staff refusal to use preferred names or pronouns for aging transgender individuals, requiring, we've had cases where, an aging transgender woman is refused gender appropriate clothing, is forced to share a room with a man, is forced to wear male clothing, all of which can be incredibly damaging emotionally, socially, and physically to those individuals. There can be general bias inherent in the healthcare industry, which just hasn't had as much training as they need to deal with issues specific to the LGBTQ aging community. And the need to rely on professional healthcare providers. So one of the things we've talked about is chosen family, and you may all be aging together. One of the things that you may be looking at is, are you going to retain the services of an in-home healthcare services provider, or some type of residential healthcare providing facility? You want to make sure that those organizations, the companies that you're contracting with, are trained to assist aging LGBTQ individuals. And this is another one of those places where healthcare powers of attorney are going to be critical, and talking about this ahead of time with those individuals is going to be critical. They've done a number of surveys on the aging LGBT community, and some of the issues that they report having sort of on an ongoing basis experiencing are verbal or physical harassment from other residents in an in-home facility for being apt LGBTQ individuals, being refused admission or readmission, or having somebody attempt a discharge because of an LGBTQ status, verbal or physical harassment from staff. Staff refusing, this was one of your issues, Debbie, staff refusing to accept a medical power of attorney from a resident's designated healthcare agent, which again, one of the things I want to encourage everybody to do is educate themselves and advocate on their own behalf.
Yes.
You have an absolute right to have your healthcare power of attorney granted the credit and recognition that it deserves, and to the extent that you run into issues, contact competent local legal counsel, and they should be able to fix that problem. And so these are the issues where, again, the national organizations are doing some really great work on training the healthcare industry. Healthcare industry is getting better, but you want to make sure, if you can, that you're doing the research ahead of time to find out, is this nursing home retirement community going to be comfortable, not only comfortable, but competent to deal with, my specific aging LGBTQ needs?
Well, it sounds to me like the primary first step to take is to find a competent attorney such as yourself, who specializes in this and can set everything up, and then meet with the people who are going to be involved with your care and being your advocate, so that everyone is on the same page, so that you don't have the stress of dealing with issues like this at the last minute. You don't want to wait till something crucial happens and then, oh my gosh, you're scrambling around trying to find answers. It's better to just go ahead and plan this ahead, and planning is so important rather than procrastinating.
I agree 100%. I cannot encourage your listeners enough, even though this is not the most enjoyable topic to sit down and think about, and it can be incredibly difficult for individuals to sit down and think about end-of-life issues and who you would want to have make these decisions. But the time to think about this and make these decisions is exactly as you pointed out, Debbie. It's not in the middle of a crisis. It's ahead of time.
No, it's true. Very true. And I always tell people, don't procrastinate, because if you procrastinate, someone else is going to step in and make their decisions for you, and you may not like what they decide.
Exactly.
And I see
the
that
only other thing,
unfortunately too much. But anyway, go ahead.
The only other thing I was going to point out is research seems to indicate that particularly for this particular generation of aging LGBTQ individuals, which are, I think we're dealing largely with baby boomers at this point, they may have lived a more closeted life. They may not be as comfortable sort of
Right.
being outspoken about their needs or their issues. And the research indicates that this community feels more comfortable if they are confident and comfortable with the person who's giving them legal advice. So
Yes.
again, that points back to my, just hop online or pick up a phone and call one of these national organizations, and they will find you somebody. They'll give you a list of names of individuals, attorneys that are comfortable and competent and familiar with practicing specifically in the area of aging LGBTQ legal issues. And then, when you're comfortable with the person giving you legal advice, it's a whole lot more, it's a smoother process to go through.
Well, and you have a neutral third party who is also looking out for your best interest, but who also knows the legal ramifications, because so many times people don't even know, regardless whether they're LGBTQ or heterosexual, they don't know what questions to ask. And a competent attorney is going to know how to get through the roadblocks that might challenge someone in this situation and solve the problem. And I should think that having a competent attorney to help you through will ease the stress and take away a lot of the fear and caution that so often appears on this. But we're almost out of time. Unfortunately, I think we could probably talk all day, but
absolutely.
And I really appreciate your coming on, taking time out of your busy day. But what can listeners do? What are some things, concrete steps that they can take other than finding a competent attorney? Like, does getting married assist with solving some of the problems? Are you already married? Prenups, postnups, all that kind of stuff. What can you recommend?
Yep. Excellent question. So the only other big areas that I would sort of put out there as food for thought is for a couple that's been together for any period of time, particularly for a significant period of time, you certainly want to consider whether or not getting married may assist with solving some of these issues, and I think it certainly can. Although marriage recognition can help, it should never be undertaken lightly. And so, again, finding a competent local attorney that's familiar with these issues that you can talk to about whether or not getting married can help, or whether or not maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it might conflict you out of receiving certain Medicaid or Medicare benefits. All of that type of planning can be done with an attorney. Whether or not you need a prenuptial agreement, if you're married, whether or not an antenuptial agreement would help, all critical necessary tools. One of the other things I'll point out is there are several jurisdictions in the United States that permit what we call common law marriage, which is marriage without having pulled a marriage license and undergone a specific legally recognized marriage ceremony. And I'll give by way of example, I'm licensed to practice in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. Washington, D.C. is a jurisdiction that permits the creation of common law marriage. And there is a recent case that just came out in D.C. that's sort of groundbreaking that indicates that D.C. is inclined, and it came out of the D.C. Court of Appeals, D.C. is inclined to recognize common law marriages retroactively, even prior to the time when same-sex marriage was recognized in D.C. or in the U.S. What does that mean? Plenty of members of our community, particularly in the aging LGBTQ community, had commitment ceremonies of some kind over the course of their relationship. If, by way of example, you had a commitment ceremony in the District of Columbia, I don't know, let's say in 1980, where you exchanged promises in the present tense to be married to one another and thereafter cohabited, you may well be married. And you may well be married in such a way that the District of Columbia will recognize that marriage all the way back to 1980 when you performed that ceremony. That can grant you a whole host of legal benefits that you didn't know you had. It can also grant a whole host of legal obligations that you didn't know you had.
Yeah,
And
really?
so again, right. And so again, finding.
Yeah. Well, Eva, we have to wrap up. Unfortunately,
Okay.
The 30 minutes is over too fast. But before we go, would you please give your information, your email, and any other information, your website for Paley Rothman that people could log on to get other information? And if they want to get in touch with you about a specific issue, if they're in the D.C., Maryland, or Virginia area. And I know you will be able to share that with us in the last few minutes.
Absolutely. My email is ejunker, EJUNCKER, at paleyrothman.com. Our firm website is www.paleyrothman.com. We have offices both in Bethesda, Maryland, and in Falls Church, Virginia. And my direct line is 301-968-3405, and I would welcome any questions or concerns that your listeners might have.
Thank you so much for joining us, Eva. You have been a wealth of information, and this is a great series on LGBTQ issues. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.